Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing looking at the life of Samson and how God can still use us even though we make mistakes or sin, and that's definitely true for the life of Samson. But a lot of the times we just think of him as the big strong guy, but he had some really big flaws, and today we're going to be looking at one of those specifically in Judges chapter 14. So, if you would turn to Judges chapter 14, we are going to see the beginning of the adult life of Samson, specifically his marriage and what that entailed. So, chapter 14 of Judges, verse 1. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all our people, that you must go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. So, time out there. So, it's when the Israelites came into the country in the book of Joshua, and really before then as well, in the book of the law, from Exodus, Numbers, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the Lord was very, very blunt and straightforward when it came to talking about how the Israelites should not marry um, from around the countries that were in the promised land because those countries did not worship Yahweh or the Lord, and so therefore they could very much stray um, the Israelites' faith from the Lord, and we definitely see that in play here. Obviously, the Philistines get very, very important when it comes to um, King David or David and Goliath, right? So we're not quite there yet with the Philistines when it comes to fame, but knowing that's what they are, that's where they're going to be in play later on in the Bible. You're thinking to yourself, oh, Samson, why did you marry a Philistine, right? And not only that, but how he goes about doing it as well. There's nothing in this patriarchal culture that is in the ancient Near East, and at this time of Samson, it was very, very common to do a dowry. So for the parents to go and get a wife for the son, that makes sense. That makes sense. But so the end of verse 2 makes sense when it comes to the parents getting a wife for Samson. But what the part doesn't make sense, there's two parts to it. One, the woman is a Philistine, so therefore most likely doesn't believe in Jehovah. And I think we definitely see that. But then later on in verse 3, it's how Samson goes about this. He's like, listen, uh, the parents try to say, look, why don't you marry within our country and stick to the law that the Lord has provided? The phrase uncircumcised Philistines is kind of getting to that. But Samson says, no, I want her, you go get her. For she is right in my eyes. Oh, just a sad statement that is. So we already see some flaws from Samson here. And so then we see verse 4. His father and mother didn't know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines actually ruled over Israel. So even before the fame of the Philistines get really great when Goliath shows up, and that's the story we know of the Philistines actually were conquering Israel before the time of David and Goliath. And this is one of those moments. So the Philistines are the country that, is the opposing country that has been sent in as a result of the sin of Israel. So it's God's judgment on them. And so, but the people have already cried out to the Lord, and so that leads to the birth of Samson. And now the Lord is starting to orchestrate the judgeship of Samson here. And so even in the midst of him basically telling his mom and dad, hey, I want what I want, and if that includes marrying somebody outside of our people, that will very much likely stray me from the Lord. Doesn't matter. I want what I want. And even in the midst of that, the Lord was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines in verse 4. That's a really, really important statement. And that's really important for us, right? When we are struggling with sin, even in the midst of that sin, the Lord is with us, and behind the scenes working things out for his glory. I think that's really important to see. So, verse 5, then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came toward him, roaring. Then the Holy Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces, as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with a woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. So just verses 5 through 7 are just kind of this crazy whoa moment, like he just beat the crap out of a lion, basically. Like that shows you his strength. And yet, on the back of that strength, which you would think, oh, that's awesome, then you get verse 7, he still goes and talks to the woman. And not only that, but he doesn't even tell his mom and dad they beat the crap out of a lion and killed it with his bare hands. And yet, he still went after this woman, and she was still right in Samson's eyes, even though she shouldn't have been. And so it's sad to see that contrast. Then verse 8, after some days he returned to take her as his wife, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out into his hands, and went on, eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother, and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. So, this is a big deal here. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal with the dead lion carcass and swarm of bees and honey, but it's a huge deal because it's touching something that's unclean and breaking that part of the Nazarite vow. He's very much going against that. And not only that, but then he causes his mother and his father to be deemed unclean as well because they eat of the honey that was in the carcass of the dead lion. Obviously, that part is very, very interesting how the honey gets in there. But, anyways, with that being said, this was obviously a test, and Samson failed. Not only that, but he made his parents stumble as well and made them unclean, and they didn't even know it. And so it's sad to see that. Then, verse 10, his father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. As soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him, so a big, big wedding party. And Samson said to them, let me now put a riddle to you. If you could tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast, a week of festivities. That's pretty crazy, right? And find it out. Then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes, which is a big expense. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes, another big expense, right? And they said to him, put your riddle that we may hear it. And he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. It's kind of like a rhyme, kind of like a song, right? And in 3 days, they could not solve the riddle. So halfway through the wedding party, they haven't figured this out. And obviously, the riddle is going back to the lion and the honey, right? On the fourth day, this is verse 15, on the fourth day, this group of 30 companions says to Samson, or says to Samson's wife, actually, sorry, which we never get her name, and I think that's important to this as well. Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? Again, that's a big expense that Samson is asking for. And Samson's wife wept over him and said, you only hate me. You don't love me. You have put a riddle to my people, and you haven't told me what it is. And he said to her, behold, I haven't told my father nor my mother. And shall I tell you? And wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted. And on the seventh day, he told her, because she pressed him hard, basically annoyed him. Then she told the riddle to her people. And the men of the city said to Samson on the seventh day, before the sun went down, the last possible second, basically, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. That part there, the if you had not plowed with my heifer, is basically this idea of using her to get to me. Which again, that's yes, that's awful. But the fact that he just gave in to her because she was annoying, and just there's no husbandry there. He's not being a good husband. Already within the first week of marriage, Samson is showing just moral this immorality already so soon into his marriage. But then verse 19 happens, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town, and took their spoil, and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger he went back to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Verse 20 is just kind of like an ouch statement. Oh my gosh, his wife got his best man got his wife. Oh, that's brutal. Like, so that's obvious. There's a lot of bad stuff within this chapter. You have the sin of touching something that's dead, or basically breaking the unclean part of his vow. Then you have this festivities that last a week, and there was probably a lot of partying going on, and then on top of that, you give this riddle, which the riddle in itself is not. I mean, that's whatever, but it leads to your wife being put into the situation that not only is she pressured to do this, but she's threatened to do this, and not only then, but then you have just you you don't respect her at all. You don't listen to her at all. It takes almost a week to for you to listen, and by then you're just over it. You're annoyed with her, so you just give in. I mean, it's just it's awful. But then out of all of this, you have this one moment in verse 19. You have this one moment where the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson in the midst of being unclean, in the midst of lying to his parents, or basically not telling them that they're unclean, and then on top of that, not being a good husband at all, and getting in a marriage that he shouldn't have been in to start with, and yet in the midst of all of that, we have the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, and he goes out in vengeance, and takes these 30 garments to pay back for the riddle. And you may think to yourself, okay, well, how is that godly? Well, remember, earlier in the chapter in verse 4, it says the Lord is seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. Well, guess what the opportunity is? It's not marrying this Philistine woman. It's not just that. It's actually this opportunity to start to take them out, to remove them from ruling Israel, which he does by killing these 30 men. Now, again, there's so much wrong here with Samson, but yet God still uses him in order to bring himself glory, and and his children, the country of Israel, glory as well. And I just think that's an amazing fact. Now, obviously this does not mean that you go out and you kill people and that's the Lord's work. No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, even in the midst of us lying, or not being a good husband, not being a good wife, not being smart within our marriage, God could still use that and still use you within that to give Him glory. And I think that's an important thing to remember in the midst of everything that's going wrong, not just with Samson, but the things that are going wrong with your life as well. Um, when there's whether it's trials or tribulations that your sin has caused, or just trials and tribulations that you're just going through. Um, it's important to see that the Lord can use us even in the midst of that. And I think the life of Samson does really well with that, but especially this chapter in Judges 14, where it talks about his marriage. So next on Thursday, we are going to dive in chapter 15, where he really starts to where he really goes after the Philistines, and he does so in a crazy magnificent way. But even then, it's hard to completely appreciate it because Samson continues to be kind of a knucklehead. So we'll get to that on Thursday. However, I will see you tomorrow with Broadman Word as well. Thanks.